Ukraine's President Zelensky said this week that the US had proposed a new critical minerals deal that goes well beyond an initial framework agreed last month. So the original idea had been to sign off a framework agreement which would set the basis for the development of the full agreement. But the US has done away with the interim stage and gone straight to the end agreement. At that point, Zelensky said he had not yet reviewed the proposal in full. Well, the Ukrainian MP Yaroslav Zhelezniak revealed today on Telegram that the new US draft minerals agreement that the US has said it hopes will be signed within days has been massively altered to once again be one-sided in America's favour and to Ukraine's detriment. The draft spans 58 pages, and unlike previous versions that were the statement of intent, this is a full-fledged legal agreement, and Zhelezniak says it's not in our favour. The agreement would apply across the entire territory of Ukraine. It would cover all minerals, not just rare earth elements, so that includes oil and gas. It includes new and existing deposits. Both state-run and private companies could be involved in extraction, but the revenues would go into a joint investment fund. For all that earlier drafts made play that the fund would largely be used for investment in the rebuilding of Ukraine, in this version, the revenues are converted into dollars and immediately leave the country. The United States get royalties from the fund before all other parties, plus 4%. The US would have so-called first night rights on all new infrastructure projects. They would have the power to veto any sale of resources to third countries. The agreement would be indefinite, so never-ending. Any changes would require United States approval. Reportedly, the draft contains a large volume of legal language that one might immediately suspect includes various other details of hidden significance, given that's how the corporate legal profession generally works. One commentator said that the details suggested the deal to be a total looting of Ukraine, with Americans having 100% control of anything that ever comes out of the ground into perpetuity. Zhelezniak commented, "It can and must be changed. Otherwise, I don't see how it could be ratified by Parliament, which it will need to be." This then is the substance of what we heard in the wake of the debacle in the Oval Office, where it was said that Trump had indicated he wanted the deal toughened up to, quote, punish the Ukrainians. One might rephrase it as to take advantage of their weakened position to grab as much for the United States as humanly possible. In addition to what's on the table, Trump has talked about his desire to see the United States taking control of nuclear power plants in Ukraine, specifically the Zaporizhzhia plant, which is the largest one and the one that's currently occupied by Russian forces, but maybe all the others as well. Now, President Zelensky has said that he's open to the idea of Zaporizhzhia, although the Russians reject that since they want to keep it for themselves, thank you very much. Zelensky is not keen, for some reason, to let Trump run the rest of his energy infrastructure. And of course it comes at a time when the negotiations with Russia have reached an equally tricky point. Trump's team remains in something of a hurry to get to a deal. Putin's team remains happy to exploit this obvious positional weakness to their maximum benefit. So this week we saw the Americans negotiating with Russia and then with Ukraine in an attempt to nudge the ceasefire process forward. And the announcement was made that they had both agreed to a naval ceasefire in the Black Sea. Except there seems to be some disagreements on both sides as to the actual details of what has been agreed. The announcement was made that Ukraine had accepted it and the US side didn't mention in that announcement any further conditions on the Russian side, just that both sides had agreed to eliminate the use of force in the Black Sea. The US did say that it would help to restore access to the world market for Russia's agriculture and fertilizer exports. But then Russia announced that the ceasefire would only take effect after a number of sanctions were lifted, including those targeting countries' state-owned agricultural bank and including some levied by Europe. In other words, having gotten agreement to the supposed deal, Russia was then trying to use this to lever relief from sanctions, something that Ukraine had not been particularly aware of or signed up for. President Zelensky tried to win the perception battle on this by suggesting to the United States that the Kremlin was attempting to deceive them. But given what we've now seen of the extraordinary intent of the Trump administration to extract mineral wealth from Ukraine, it's not clear that Zelensky's attempts have the slightest chance of making an impression. As I said, some of the sanctions from which Russia sought relief were amongst those that were imposed by the European Union. The EU said on Wednesday this week that it has no intention of lifting or amending sanctions unless Putin agrees to unconditionally withdraw Russia's forces from Ukraine. Europe, of course, had not been at the table for the talks in brokering a Black Sea ceasefire. In the meantime, Trump has at least admitted that it's possible, just possible, that the Russians could be, quote, dragging their feet on the idea of a peace deal. The sort of revelation that the phrase, "no shit, Sherlock," was surely invented for. But he added that he still believes that Putin wants an end to the war and noted that it's the sort of tactic that he has used himself in the past. "I've done it over the years," Trump said. "You know, I don't want to sign a contract. I want to sort of stay in the game, but maybe I don't want to do it quite. I'm not sure." Get ready to contrast that tone of forbearance and understanding with the tone of response we will likely see if and when the Ukrainians reject the newly toxified minerals deal. But of course, this is the point. America feels that it can bully Ukraine into accepting terms to their disadvantage, and like any mafia boss, Trump aims to take full advantage of their weakness. They want to have a deal of equals with Russia, though, with lots of mutual benefits that have nothing to do with Ukraine, whose fate the current administration holds in much the same contempt as we have seen that they have for the whole of Europe. So Putin has every incentive to push for the maximum concessions for every little baby step that his side makes, as he builds the platform of strength from which he can completely win the war, which remains his goal. He's already gotten Trump's golfing buddy come envoy, Steve Witkoff, burbling on to Tucker Carlson about how Ukraine isn't a real country and the referenda in the Russian-controlled areas had shown that the people there really wanted to be Russian, and so on and so on. So sure, yeah, he's going to keep pushing. His basic claim for eventual peace talks is focusing in on demanding that Ukraine exits a swath of additional territory that Putin has decided is new Russia. And it would swallow up twice as much territory as Russia already occupies and would cut Ukraine off from the Black Sea altogether. It is a ridiculous proposition that Ukraine would never accept. But whether the Trump administration would come to support it, as in their eyes the price for peace, is another matter. The question remains what Ukraine and Europe does with a seriously degrading set of options. Do they at some point hit the metaphorical nuclear button by breaking with the Americans, recognizing that they have become de facto adversaries? At which point every resource available to the Trump administration, short of military engagement I would expect, will be levied against Ukraine. Starlink internet connections cancelled, all intelligence sharing cancelled, maybe sanctions levied against Ukraine, maybe against Europe if they continue to support them. Or do Europe and Ukraine struggle on, just trying to give away just enough of their country's wealth to keep the Trump team from adopting a position of open hostility, since actual support is realistically off the table? Neither option is going to be easy. Neither is obviously one that offers a route to success and survival. There is still some time for more unpredictability from Trump, which could go either way, more incompetence, and the unforeseen events that might affect the balance again. It comes to a lot when that is all that we have left to hope for.